Hello and welcome to another episode of Exchanges with me, Evan Lucas. This week I have got one of the most cerebral thinkers that I know out there, Steve Sammartino, futurist that is absolutely at the forefront of the AI revolution and has been for over 3 decades now. His thinking, his understanding, and his very, very deep knowledge of this space makes him an absolute perfect person to have on. He is also one of the most phenomenal keynote speakers I've ever seen. If you haven't gone and seen him, please, I recommend you do so. Before we go any further with the exchanges, don't forget we are now sponsored here by More. More is a lifestyle by design app for all of you out there that are trying to get on top of your wealth, particularly your property. It is there designed to basically go through everything that you need in one design app. That's more, moorr.com.au. But now, without any further ado, let's get on with this week's exchanges and Steve Sammartino. Steve Sammartino, welcome to Exchanges. You and I banter a lot, so this is going to go quite a lot of different ways, and I know that's going to be the case. So let's start with the big top of the funnel question: are tech companies, digital age, being the starting point of what is now probably being seen as one of the biggest cultural declines we've ever seen in history?
Yeah,
Big
definitely.
question.
Yeah, that's a huge question. Tech companies are largely responsible for the cultural decline. Having said that, uh, governments allowed them to get away with it because the decline had already started. And institutions have there was a doctrine, and I think it goes way back to Reaganomics and Thatcher, where in his inaugural speech, Reagan said, "Government isn't the solution, government is the problem." And the institutions were largely defanged right through that period, and we
Mhm.
had a doctrine which said that, lower taxes equal jobs and growth, and globalization is the answer, and it did, made us a little bit wealthier, but what happened was companies became far too powerful, CEO wages went through the roof, we all started working for these big corporations, but then the big corporations really started to shape government policy in a way that was to their advantage, and so there's this symbiosis between government and big corporations where they coalesced together to sort of bring a financial future with the promise that there was trickle down. And I think trickle down's interesting because the problem is in the name. You only get a trickle if you're not at the top, right? It's like, who wasn't getting this clue? The clue was in the name. You
Yeah.
only get a trickle. And then what happened was we didn't get antitrust and we didn't get regulation around digital economies because no one understood it. And if I was to say one thing, it would be that big tech are media companies masquerading as technology companies. And because they're not responsible for the untruths and the algorithms that they put forward, they put people into wormholes of misinformation. And so then everything just starts to crumble around that.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful start because I think that's where we've got to is that tech has been this big, incredible industrial revolution, digital
Mm.
revolution that governments just don't understand, right? And they've been allowed to move as we've seen. So, on that point, taking your sort of whole concept there, because I actually fully completely agree with it. The trickle is there. The marketing term is a horrible one. Again, you've missed out. But what's also therefore been allowed, particularly in the basically since the millennia kicked around. I mean, let's look at from Y2K onwards
Mm.
in your world is that basically what you're saying is that once we realized that Y2K wasn't going to happen and that tech companies could actually get their houses in order after the dot-com bubble, we've been away. Take me through the evolution because I think the evolution started with Google. I think the evolution actually
Mm.
goes all the way back further to that to starting with the evolution of things like Microsoft and Apple back in the 80s and 70s and stuff. But the real evolution has started basically in the year 2000 to where we are
Yeah,
now.
it's a good point.
And the revolution then is how do we how do we actually bring it back to society rather than what's currently clearly happening, which is running its almost at exponential growth, and nobody actually has an ability to not necessarily rein it in, but actually harness it for good.
It does go back to the early 2000s. We called it, and it started off pretty well when that occurred. If we go back, the term used then was Web 2.0, and the definition of a Web 2.0 website, and this is blogging, early e-commerce, early social channels, Friendster. The definition of a Web 2.0 website is a website where the power of the site itself is created by the users who are on it. And that means that it gave tools of connection and commerce to the average person without investing in infrastructure. So that was a real period of emancipation. And
So
again,
you could,
talking
I'm
to
going to
the
interrupt
age,
you. So what you, I think that needs to be really fleshed out there. What you're basically saying is that was the start of the
yep,
breakdown of bricks and mortar as well. Because what you're saying is that we, like losing wholesalers in the 90s, we
mm,
lost the bricks and mortar with
mm.
the ability to take commerce from the high street to the house.
Yeah, and that was good in the early days. I think this was really what the web had promised. And you got to remember, big tech companies were like Rupert Murdoch's the devil, big retailers, all that. We're going to come and give you the power as the populace. But all of a sudden, you were the CEO of your own personal media corporation, right? Which we still do to an extent now. And I'll get to where the problems are with that. But it was handing over the tools of production to the populace at low or no cost so that you could create your own media, sell your own goods, have an easy way to do online banking. And so we had this growth of people who were worth listening to, who previously weren't in a position of power in corporations or in media to have a voice. So everyone had a voice, people could sell their goods and services, and it was an incredibly emancipating period. It was blogs, it was social, where if the things that you said and the thoughts that you had, they would naturally bubble to the top because people would share and say, this guy's really worth listening to. Ev Lucas, the economist down in Melbourne, he's the cat, mate. You want to listen to him. It doesn't have to be someone who's in the media or on CNN.
Yeah.
And, oh, this person's selling these amazing goods or services. That happened. And that was Web 2.0. And it was really, the world is flat. There was even a book came out that said the world is flat. And that was the whole, Wikinomics, everyone can participate. Then just around about the time of the smartphone, 2007, 2008, Twitter, Facebook, SEO started to get gamed on Google, where Google used to be the most important website would go to the top. Then everyone started to game it, and then corporations who could game the SEO would get to the top. Algorithms started to come in where things that were most popular and being shared would get shared more. And it turns out that those things are divisive, things that make you angry, not things that make you happy or not things that are valuable that people need. They started to use algorithms to get people to stay on the sites because their business model, unfortunately, was attention
Yeah.
rather than value. And when your business model is attention, you will naturally create tools that keep people stuck to the screen for as long as possible. And it turns out they're not the healthy things, the voices worth listening to, or the products worth buying. They're the things that are most divisive, attention grabbing, that anger us, that put us into wormholes, that are uh, political delineations.
Because I want to go on that because I think that concept now, particularly today, is becoming the biggest thing. So it's now basically just a one word, which is polarizing, right? So the
Polarizing.
the the,
Go.
the buzz term, it's very, very strong with, particularly what we're doing right now. I understand the full irony of it, which is, you do have a podcast or a blog or some form of social perspective that they even recommend to get your listener group, to grow your base and grow your acolytes, is to polarize and the polarization of it.
And it works
Yeah. Why?
still. I think it comes back to the basic human DNA. We haven't had a software upgrade in 200,000 years.
Mhm.
It turns out fear keeps you alive. Hope and love is nice to have,
Yeah.
right? So something that is naturally gets you worried or angry or aggressive, we have a natural proclivity to pay more attention to that because what was that rustling in the bush? Was that a saber-toothed tiger? I better run. This is the digital equivalent. And so you go, I better check this out. This is dangerous. This angers me. I'm upset about this. And so the polarizing stuff, and even when I do a LinkedIn post that's polarizing, like it gets more views
Yeah.
because they share it with more people. More people are likely to see it and then share it and comment. And so
And
we
the
get into,
algorithm loves it too, right?
so the algorithm is designed to do that,
Yeah.
right? Because that keeps people there. For me though, the problem is that they need to keep us there. So they create algorithms, rhythms that, suck attention, but also, uh, the voices worth hearing out there, and algorithms essentially are an editorial decision. And this is the important part of algorithms make media because that's an editorial decision in the modern era. But it turns out that algorithm focused content still isn't regarded anywhere in the world as media. And the media channels of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Google, whatever, are not behest to the same rules as traditional media. All right. So all of their externalities, all of the bad stuff that happens, they're like, sorry, we can't be responsible for the content on our platform. Which is kind of like saying on McDonald's, I've got a dirty teenager who didn't wash his hands in the hamburgers, and we've all got encephalitis. Sorry, teenager made the hamburger. Sorry, not my fault. Like
Yep.
that's what we're tolerating. It's insane that we let them get away. And by the way, while I'm on my rant, big tech are not nearly as profitable as you think they are. The problem is they're putting their effluent in the river, which is the society we swim in, right? And they're not paying a cent for it.
So, because I agree with that. So, this is the other thing about the Switch, right? Is big tech does make this comment that they are absolutely the biggest player out there. The other thing is what's fascinating by it is that their whole model is based off content creation, and therefore, as you said before, the emancipation and basically the whole river is designed to basically make their boat move forward,
Hmm.
but they don't have to pay the river.
Well,
So,
look, this is the point, right? Again, another reason they're not as profitable. You
yeah,
know, the most profitable business strategy of all time, and I know that you're a student of history as I am,
yep,
is to steal your raw materials.
yep.
All right. I'm living in a country that was stolen. Sadly and embarrassingly, it was a stolen country, right? Gee, that's a profitable strategy. That's what the English did. Oh, what about Rockefeller and the oil? We'll just steal the oil out of the ground. Is it the population's? Oh no, it's mine. I dug it up and I stole it. Put a fence around things, steal raw materials, and now the raw materials is people are working for free for Facebook and TikTok in the hope that they will get big enough to get a tiny portion of the revenue share. That's insane,
Yeah, and I
right?
I
And
I
so
think that's
how are they
perfectly
so
because I
profitable?
agree with it. Like the hope, right? That if I get to a certain amount of
Selling hope.
followers,
They're selling hope and dreams,
yeah,
and then on the
and
flip
you've got to
side,
feed
they
it.
sell
You've
yeah,
got to feed the beast. Like if you
feeling
don't,
hope.
if you as soon as you stop feeding the beast, that you drop out of the algorithm. As soon as you drop out of the algorithm, inverted commas, you're in social media suicide scenarios, right? So
Right.
it all of and again, I get the irony of what you and I are doing right now with regards to sitting in and where we are. But this then brings into the next part of the whole discussion we're having, which is the added now third revolution, which
Yeah,
is AI,
they are.
right? And
Yeah.
how AI now is not just basically in the boat, it's the motor engine on the boat pushing yourself down.
Yeah. So
Take
we
me
got
through it.
access to the engine. I mean, if we use this industrial analogy, we have now got access to the engine.
Yeah.
There's good news. We actually get a chance to reframe again. The good news about the increasing recursion and frequency of tech revolutions, as you know, they're all getting smaller and smaller. So the internet's a 30-year revolution, the smartphone's 15 years, and we'll have 7 years of AI before we get to the quantum age or the nano age, right? So we'll have 7 years. So they're getting shorter and shorter and shorter, which means we get a chance to go, this is what we got wrong last time. Let's reframe. We've now got the access to the engine. The ironic thing is the engine's been provided again by the Magnificent Seven, the big companies that are controlling the AIs and handing them to us. We need to get to open source and stay to open source. Because if we don't get to
Explain
open
that. Just
source,
just just explain that so people understand what you mean by open source.
there's two types of business models in technology. There's a technology where the tool is available to everyone, or the tool has a boundary around it where you have to participate using their tools in their rules and you can't manipulate the software.
Yeah.
If the software is open source, then we all get a chance to use it, build it, and create our own versions of it and have a fragmented market, which I think is good. The more fragmented the market, the better it is, right, for the larger population.
So
A
take me through a model like
consolidated
that. Is that like a chat GPT or what the chat GPT is
Okay,
trying to do?
so all of them are based on one thing called the Transformer paper,
Yep.
which is a paper that discovers how large language models work and machine learning and deep learning. ChatGPT is not open source. It's owned and
Yep.
controlled by OpenAI/Microsoft. Claude is I think Amazon. You've got Gemini is Google. DeepSeek, the Chinese model, have put out their code and made it open source. Lambda, which is the Facebook one, is open source. So there's a bit of an open source, closed source play right now. We don't know who will win. The problem at the moment is that we need large chipsets and GPUs, which is why NVIDIA is going crazy with its market cap, going well over 2 trillion, to actually get an effective global-based AI. But here's the thing. I don't think we need global AIs, because what we're doing is we're putting a whole lot of chips that can answer anything, but they really only answer a tiny portion of potential questions. So hopefully we'll work out a way to be more efficient in chip usage, so we could have on our laptop, the laptop I'm looking at right now, could have an AI large language model inside it, where it goes to the web, gets what it needs, it's trained enough, and it doesn't need GPUs and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of chipsets to be able to churn through the data and give the answers.
Because that
So-
also comes to the next part about what you're talking about there, the energy usage, right?
Yeah, and that'll reduce energy. So chips and energy are really the same thing. If you need a lot of chips, you need a lot of energy. If you don't
Yep.
need a lot of chips, you don't need a lot of energy. AI might even solve some of those problems. I actually think that AI weirdly will have this recursion effect where it goes back and goes, hey, you human idiots, did you know that you would use less chips and therefore less energy if you did it this way instead of that way? Because the AI can see things that we can't see, because it can do things at such a huge quantum. So maybe it'll help us find the answers where we don't need to have these giant models. But hardware and software, they work in concert with each other. Right. So the software could work, but often it needs certain hardware for that to function. What we need to find out is a way where we can use this software with not as much hardware and energy, then we can localize it. And we've kind of done that with the smartphone anyway. We've localized things that used to require huge networks. Yes, it uses the cloud and it bounces in and out, but we're probably going to need a hybrid model where we have a local AI that goes to the big AI when it needs to, but then mostly just stays on our local hardware. So we kind of go away from the cloud again, back to our own controlled data points on our own pieces of hardware. Because the cloud is really, really suited to large corporations because it gives them tacit control. Gee, this has got nerdy fast, hasn't it?
Yeah, but that's all right, because that's where I wanted to go. Because what you're basically, the next question is that what you're suggesting is that the race is not to control the hardware, it's to control the cloud system and to control the hubs that sound like will be required, where sooner or
Yeah.
later, the laptop will have the base, the sort of the small AI that then feeds into the hub and feeds back. And is that basically why you are seeing, your Amazons, your Microsofts, and your Googles investing in these big hub centers in the desert, etc., to try and basically be that group? Because again, as you said, getting back to your point before about open source versus closed, that means they're still basically creating a closed
source,
one
because
closed
closed
source.
source is more profitable. Here's the ironic thing. All of the big tech companies that didn't exist 30 years ago, I mean, Microsoft and Apple did, but all of the big tech companies, even Apple and Microsoft have
It's
moved
Google's
forward.
30th birthday this year, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was launched in
95? Yeah.
something like that. All of them were built on open source Linux software, which was the post-Microsoft, military industrial complex software that became open source.
Yeah.
And then what they did was they went open source. It's the same with, they have open APIs where anyone can use our stuff. And then once they're built and developed, then they put a fence around it and close it. So that's the kind of ironic thing. You tend to go open source, closed source, bundling, unbundling. What we have to hope for is AI creates an unbundling where power is then fragmented and distributed, because it doesn't seem like the US government, or any government for that matter, is going to regulate big tech in the way that they need to, because they've just got political capture now with their
Well, let's go there. Let's go there, because I think we need to. We've just seen the election of Donald Trump. It's clear that we have seen those companies that we've been sort of flirting around, Microsoft, no, not really Microsoft, but Meta, Facebook, Amazon, Tesla with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
All of these big tech bros and their open and closed source scenarios really closing up to administration that, as you said, will not and probably doesn't want to go down the antitrust, go down the regulations,
No.
go down a scenario to make things that are clearly becoming more and more closed to be more open. What is the step here? Is it, as you sort of suggesting, that AI actually does it for us and sort of allows us open source, or are we now at a world and have to accept that economies of scale, which has always been seen as a great thing, is going to actually lead to the negative end, which is that we just basically have, almost sort of umbrella corporation from, the sort of the video game that is Resident Evil, and and we just have this one conglomerate provider as we scale
Yeah,
to
well, in a way, if it goes deep enough and long enough, the corporations become the government. They become the same thing.
right.
At the moment, they're not quite the same thing. And the reason is if corporations became umbrella corp and everyone sits under that umbrella of a giant conglomerate that does everything technologically, industrial, manufacturing, whatever, if they had to serve the people, then that would be fine because that's what the government used to be before we privatized all of the natural monopolies and utilities. Right? It was kind of what we had. And then we rationalized that, sold off all of the assets. The problem is that the ownership structures of these large corporations is really thin. And one of the doctrines that came around in the early 2000s was all of these tech bro founders had special voting rights where, regardless of their equity stake in the companies, they had control over them. And that's actually the problem is the control. I don't think these companies uh, would see control to the population. So we need them to be split up because they're just far too powerful. They're
So
more
who
powerful
has
than
the
humans.
political capital to do that?
Well, I don't think anyone does because they've captured the government, especially in the US. The US has now become a corporate kleptocracy where a handful of companies influence decision making, and the population, unfortunately, is not clever enough to see what's going on or react on it, or is only a small portion are. The large majority think that those that claim that they will save them are actually the same ones ripping them off, and they just don't realize it. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen,
Hmm.
since
Yep.
paying attention to economics. So I they need to be split up, but I don't think anyone's got the political capital. Like in this country, we don't even have the political capital to enforce multinationals to pay their share of tax. We let them shift profit to related parties, which is insane. Again, there's so many insane things going on. 30% of the ASX 300 paid zero tax last year, and I think it's for the last 5 years, it's around about 30% don't pay any. I just don't know why we don't move to a land tax kind of situation
It's revenue
where we
tax,
say
right? So why do we not have
revenue-based tax. Yeah,
why do we not have basically a flat rate 10% on all revenue
yeah,
created?
5% of all
Which is
revenue.
which is technically what GST is supposed to do, right? Which is what the GST, but again, it's more than that. It's basically saying, okay, you've got goods and services being offered at 10%, but also all revenues generated
For
is
large
there.
corporations. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's say you're a corporation over
And then you
250.
and then you don't have to go down the point of view, which is why you're talking about the fact that, 30% of the ASX 300 doesn't have it, is because they are carrying forward losses, right? And profit-based taxing has that issue.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Profit-based taxing just is laughable,
Yeah,
and
because
you can do it on a
net
you can do it
losses
with
can be carried.
multinationals and locals. And do you know what? Everyone says, "Oh, that'll discourage investment." No, it won't.
No.
No, it won't. They'll just do whatever. I've worked in these large corporations. I worked in some of the biggest I worked at the world's biggest consumer goods company, the world's biggest advertising and media company, and we had things that happened that were unexpected. And here's what happened every time our profit got hit for whatever reason. We took what was left. You just take what's available. You go, "Oh, well, that's the wall. The world, the government is sovereign," and you take what's there. They're not gonna leave. They're gonna go, "Oh, we're packing up our ship and we're gonna leave. Google's gonna leave face." No, they're not. Miners, they're not gonna leave. They're still gonna extract the stuff out of the ground.
Because they can't leave, it's still there, right? And
What are
even
they gonna do?
so, the argument with the multinationals is how how do you tax something that, again, as you said at the start of this discussion, which is nobody understands how digital works, right? How do you
Well, it's
how do
pretty
you
easy.
tax? But I agree with you, it's super easy.
It's
But this
really
is
easy. It's either if it's corporate revenue, you see it with the companies that spend the money on them. That's the
yeah,
first bit. And the second bit, if it's consumer revenue, it goes on a credit card because 95% of transactions are digital. So you go, we know what your revenue is with Australian people and Australian businesses.
yeah.
Here's your tax bill. Congratulations. You're my newest taxpayer. And if you don't do it, guess what happens? Your CEOs and your C suite go to jail to pay it. That's the end. It's not even a discussion. The governments need to realize they are sovereign and they represent the people.
Yep. But again, the argument coming back at you, unfortunately, is that if you're suing or at least taking Google or Meta for that example, or even some of the main sort of
No, you don't
e-commerce
sue. It's
providers.
tax avoidance. You go straight to jail.
Yeah,
Tax
but how
avoidance
do you
equals
get at
jail.
the moment? How do you get the US government, with the current US government that we have, to actually send their CEO to Australia to be prosecuted for it?
No, no. Well,
Um,
you do it with the local operators. They're the
yeah,
ones that go to jail, right?
yeah,
Because they live here.
yeah.
And you come up and you put handcuffs on them and they go to jail the day they don't pay. I promise you, they're going to pay. Every single one. They won't like it, but they'll pay. I promise you.
Yeah, and the case in point is what's happened. Not exactly the greatest example, but we've seen the Chinese corporations and the corporate governments do that to international governments, including, for instance, Rio Tinto, when they had a scenario where they believed that Rio Tinto was gouging, and away they went, and it would created a political incident. But again, you're right. I think the other thing you've got to give credit to, as much as I hate saying it, but to what is going on in the US is that the president is designed to look after the United States of America, and anybody else doesn't really matter. It's the same here in Australia. The prime minister is designed, and the government of the day is designed to look after the national interests of
Interests. That's
of the
right.
country. And so if it creates a political international spat, then so be it. And I think that is also part and parcel of where we get is that if that was to happen, you watch how fast players like Europe would also back onto it because they have the same problem and are still grappling with the same scenario. Can we work collectively as a unit to put domestic interests that actually end up being international interests? I think that's the question. The part and final part of the question for this discussion is work and us. We are talking about, as you said, content creators working on the hope that they can get a tiny fraction revenue. The idea that digital and service economies are going to have to constantly compete over and over with the fact that AI is going to take people's jobs. Where is the future of work in your eyes now with the digital AI nano revolutions that are happening now, as you said, at almost sort of square rootage speed declines?
Oh, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. The future of work. The
Yeah.
first one is we have a lag effect, which is always true. The available technology is rarely employed by large corporations at its capability. It takes a long time. It's 3, 5, 10 years before that capability is fully employed. So I don't think we fall off a cliff straight away with AI. We just basically do what we did yesterday more efficiently. All right. Small businesses probably get affected a little bit more because you might have had a media agency or some people in a low cost labor market do some editing for you, and now you can get an AI to do it. So the fringe businesses, I think, get hurt first more than the big businesses. But then you get local businesses become more efficient because they don't have to spend as much money outsourcing to various pieces of the puzzle, whether it's accountants, whether it's media, whether it's content creation. If you're a local restaurant or whatever, I think it's sort of that they'll even each other out. So the first one is there's a lag effect, and I don't think it'll impact us for a while. But I do think that with AI, we're going to get a marrying up with the mind with the muscle. Let me explain that. During the Industrial Revolution, we added combustion engines and steam engines and everything to a bunch of, let's call them machines and carts and things that were physical, but the machines already existed, pulleys and systems, basically got engines added to them. We added artificial muscle to machines that we already had. A horse
Hmm.
and cart, get rid of the horse, plonk in a motor.
Yep.
Simple example. All through the Industrial Revolution, we married these two things up. We're about to do that with AI, but this time it's with the mind. So we had a lot of machines that work, robots building cars in factories. Now we're going to add AI to machines that exist. So it's going to be car and a robo taxi. It's going to be a humanoid robot with a large language model and AI vision and all of the things that humans can do inside of it. It's going to be machines at an industrial level which are smart with soft exoskeletons. So I actually think in the next 10 years, the deglobalization is going to continue. And like you say, what Trump is doing theoretically despite the fact that he probably announces tariffs, buys a whole lot of stock, and then says, "Yeah, nah, let's give you 90 days," and then sells his stocks. Put that aside for a second. Yeah,
Yes,
nah.
please, because that's
Yeah,
what pretty much just happened. But anyway,
it pretty much has happened. But let's say he does care about America. Let's give the benefit of the doubt. Don't know if it's true, but let's say that it is. We are going to go through a significant period of deglobalization for two reasons. Globalization didn't benefit the large populations, it benefited the holders and owners of capital. And here's what we got cheap t shirts and hollowed out our economy and Ponzi schemes on housing because there was nothing else to invest in. Another reason housing has gone so high, what are you going to invest in? You used to invest in the local plastics factory or glass factory or denim factory in Australia. There's nothing to invest in. So what do? You either own a cafe or buy houses. They're the two things we've got. And we don't really have much. A bit of agriculture and dig some stuff out of the ground. So globalization didn't work. We're going to have, I think, an elongated period of deglobalization because the population's saying, how is this helping me? It's not. It doesn't help me in the Midwest. I used to be a coal miner. It's not going to help me. That's going to happen. The good news is AI and robotics can and should bring manufacturing back to high-cost labor markets. Now, some of the listeners might know that there was a video going around 2 days ago that AI generated showing Americans with sewing machines. Did you
yeah.
see it?
Oh yeah, the Chinese
It was
propaganda video.
funny and good, but I think it missed. I think it was a miss in my opinion. And I'll tell you why it was a miss. It's looking at manufacturing in low-cost labor markets where you only go there because it's cheap labor on old machines. The future of manufacturing is not that. The future of manufacturing is AI and robotics, where the actuators and the robots are taught by humans how to do things, and we work in a series of symbiosis where we train the robots verbally and visually on what to do, where everyone can have a humanoid robot and micro manufacturing in their backyard,
Yeah.
where we can now start to manufacture things one size fits one at the efficiency levels beyond any low-cost labor market because the labor cost is zero and these robots can work 24 hours a day and the robots cost less than $10,000 for a figure one humanoid robot that can do anything a human can do and better. And you can teach it by showing it a video or telling it, here's how you sew denim jeans. And I'm going to launch Stevie jeans that are the coolest and the best. This is what people are missing.
So it's like
Now,
it's just the advancement even further on of
like
things like 3D printing, right? So
exponential 3D
yeah,
printing, nano robots, humanoid robots doing manufacturing in high cost labor markets, which will be cheaper because you take the raw materials and reconfigure them here. You
yeah.
don't have to ship them. I think that's actually the future of where work's going, only if we remain open source. Only. And if that happens, we can start to make and do things in local markets and actually have a fragmented economy, the original hope of the internet.
Massive. We could talk about this for years. I'm realize I'm conscious of time, so I am going to finish up with what I ask every single one of my guests, which is Steve Sammartino. If you were in control for just one day, what would you do?
I would make a law the world over that there is no such thing as any form of political donation or lobbying. And
Okay.
here's why. If we do that, then we start to get the political will and the decisions made for the majority of the population. And I think the biggest problem in the world right now is that decisions are not made for people, they're made for funders. And I don't think money does equal free speech, and I don't think it ever should. And I think Citizens United, which was the law in the US, the court case that said that money equals free speech, might be the most damaging law ever passed in the history of humanity.
Big. I love a big answer because I think you're right. I mean, it's even more simple than that in my view. Is that interest groups have way too much connection with
Yeah,
politicians,
if
and
that's right.
and
You
and
shouldn't
so
lottery accept the dollar.
yeah, correct. And
We've
so
got the ABC. Here's what you do. Two political parties, equal time, equal news. Oh, you want to have a media company in Australia? You have to provide, here's the rule. You have to provide equal channels to any political party who wants to put up their message. No algorithms. Everyone gets equal thing. No money spent on advertising, no fundraising, no anything. Actually, we should fund it with our own money. Here's an extra dollar a week on your tax that funds it so you can have a fair political game without any corporate influence.
yeah,
And I
and
feed off corporations, but I know that the people that work in corporations for the big companies, even the CEOs that I work, agree with me. Yes, we all work in these companies because we're all ensconced, but that's okay. We know that we would rather have representative democracy, which is not tainted by finance.
It's a big, big topic. Steve Sammartino, what a fascinating exchange. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Mate, love to be here, Ev. Thanks so much for having me.
What an episode. Big, big thinking. I told you that he would be. Steve has some incredible insights. Very big cerebral thinker in terms of what he does. And I cannot thank you enough for coming on to the program. As always, also to you out there, thank you so much for listening. For those of you that have subscribed, for those of you who haven't, please don't forget, down the bottom on the subscribe link, whether it's on YouTube, whether you're listening this through Apple, Spotify, what have you, please don't forget to hit subscribe. It does help with the amount of followers that we can get and therefore the amount of speakers that we can get in. If you do have any other ideas also for exchanges, don't forget we've got an email which is exchanges@evanlucas.com.au. But once again, thank you to Steve and thank you for you for listening. And until next week, have a great day.